Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2019 Martin Luther King Jr. Living Legacy Convocation. My name is Dana Wilder, and I am the Interim Associate Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion. On behalf of my colleagues in the Office for Diversity and Inclusion, including this Cultural Center, we thank you for taking the time to join us today as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. King. Normally, community outreach introduces this week of honoring Dr. King with a day of service on the Monday that is the holiday observed. This year, because of weather challenges, Monday, the day of service has been rescheduled to Sunday, February 3rd. You can register on UContact by clicking the day of service link. Remember, it was Dr. King who said, "Not everyone can be famous, but everyone can be great, because greatness is determined by service." We are pleased that we were able to stream this event to our regional campuses in the UConn Health this year, because the Living Legacy Convocation was born out of the idea that as a university community, we have the opportunity to live Dr. King's legacy together and learn from the lessons he left us in order to work towards building a truly inclusive community at UConn and beyond. President Herbst is out of state on university business and extends her regrets for not being able to join us today. However, we do have a very distinctive individual here to provide opening remarks for our program. I would like to invite our Chairman of the Board of Trustees, Thomas Kruger, to bring you greetings. Chairman Kruger.
Dana, thank you. On behalf of the UConn Board of Trustees, good afternoon and welcome to the University of Connecticut's Dr. Martin Luther King Living Legacy Convocation. Thank you for joining us for this very special event. I think it's important to note that events like this one are not simply to honor and celebrate Dr. King and his legacy, but are also a powerful reminder that his life, his work, and his values are as relevant today as they were half a century ago. Though he has been gone for more than 50 years, Dr. King's relentless pursuit of justice, fairness, equality, and prosperity for all of his fellow Americans lives on, as does his hope for peace throughout the world. Our nation and the globe would be wise to look to Dr. King's example and the lessons of his life as we confront the challenges of the modern era. Thank you to the organizers of this event, to our students and faculty and staff, and if you are guests on campus today, then welcome to the University of Connecticut. I know this is going to be an outstanding event. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kruger. Unfortunately, our spoken word artist called a couple of hours ago and told us she has a temperature of 105. So, in conjunction with the CDC, we suggested that she remain at home. So next we have a musical selection performed by the UConn Jazz Ensemble, joined by the UConn Chamber Singers and a complement of strings. They will be performing "You'll Never Walk Alone," a show tune from the 1945 Rodgers and Hammerstein musical Carousel. The piece was arranged by the ensemble's director, Professor John Mastriani.
Hold your head. everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amma Pia, and I'm currently a fourth-year student here at UConn. I'm a double major in molecular and cell biology and communication, and I serve as the student body president of the undergraduate population here at Stewart's. And it is an honor to introduce our guest speaker today. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "If you lose hope, somehow you lose the vitality that keeps life moving. You lose that courage to be, that quality that helps you go on in spite of it all." And so today, I still have a dream. The Living Legacy Convocation provides the opportunity for the UConn community to acknowledge that in spite of the passage of time, through actions, we are all accountable for making Dr. King's dream a reality. Today, we are proud to welcome Chief Justice Richard A. Robinson as a speaker for this year's Martin Luther King Jr. Living Legacy Convocation. Chief Justice Robinson is the first African-American Chief Justice in Connecticut Supreme Court history. As a native of Stamford, Connecticut, he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree from UConn and earned his Juris Doctor degree from West Virginia University in 1984. He was appointed as the judge of the Connecticut Appellate Court in 2007 and a justice of the Supreme Court in 2013. He was staff counsel of the City of Stamford Law Department from 1985 to 1988. In 1988, he became Assistant Corporation Counsel in Stamford, where he remained until his appointment as a judge of the Superior Court in 2000. His career is complemented by an array of public and judicial service. He served as president of the Stamford branch of the NAACP from 1988 to 1990, and from 1999 to 2000, he was a chairman of the Connecticut Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. He was named the winner of the Connecticut Bar Association's Henry J. Nurek Judiciary Award for Integrity in 2017. In 2010, Robinson was awarded the Connecticut Bar Association Young Lawyers Section Diversity Award. "Make sure that your reach exceeds your grasp," Robinson once advised students. "Always keep trying, always go with a higher level, and don't ever forget where you came from." Please join me in welcoming Chief Justice Richard A. Robinson.
Thank you very much. I first want to thank you all here at the University of Connecticut for the tremendous honor of addressing you today at Martin Luther King Jr.'s Living Legend Convocation. I also want to thank UConn's Office for Diversity and Inclusion for asking me to be today's keynote speaker. Dr. King was one of my personal heroes, and it is tremendously humbling to have the opportunity to celebrate him at this event. The theme of today's program is Courageous Paths, a new level of justice. I would suggest to you that in showing us the way, Dr. King has raised the bar for every single one of us in this room, and that we owe it to him to strike out on that path to achieve justice and fairness that every individual deserves. In doing so, however, do not deceive yourself. There will be times when you must draw upon your reserve of courage, as many of those who came before us. As Dr. King so aptly observed, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step towards the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, struggle, and the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. We are in one of those uneasy periods where national conversations on religion, race, culture, gender, and sexuality are causing us all a great deal of angst. There has been a pushback on hard-won advancements that we made in these last few decades. I would be lying to you if I said I was not concerned about what's going on. Yes, I've seen pushbacks before. In fact, there has been pushback after times, there's always been pushbacks after times of great achievements in social justice, like the passage of the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, or the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote, or the reversal of the separate but equal doctrine, or the recognition of marriage equality as a constitutional right. Like you, I have witnessed what is going on, and I've been feeling a wide range of emotions. Emotions like anger, fear, grief, resentment, and yes, even despair. Last month, I celebrated the 21st anniversary of my 40th birthday. You gotta admit, that sounds a lot better than saying I turned 61. I tell you my age because I have lived through one of the most remarkable periods of this country's history. To quote Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. My life is bookended by the torture and killing of Emmett Till, the event that would not only have a major impact on my own life, would actually trigger the start of the civil rights movement that Dr. King would eventually lead. A movement that would eventually result in the election of our first black president, Barack Obama. On a Sunday morning in August 1955, in a little town called Money, Mississippi, a frightened 14-year-old black child named Emmett Bobo Till endured a night of unimaginable terror and pain at the hands of two white men, J.W. Millam and his half-brother, Roy Bryant. Millam's wife had earlier accused Bobo of flirting with her. In his final moments on the earth, the last thing that Bobo heard was Millam ordering him to pick up a 74-pound Jenny fan wheel. As Millam and Bryant later admitted during an interview in Look magazine, the child staggered under its weight and carried it to a riverbank. He lowered the wheel van to the ground and silently stared at his tormentors. Millam told him, "Take off your clothes." Slowly, Bobo pulled off his shoes, his socks. He stood up, unbuttoned his shirt, dropped his pants, his shorts, and stood there naked. It was Sunday morning, a little before 7 o'clock. Millam asked Bobo, "You still say you're as good as I am?" Bobo answered, "Yes." Millam said, "You still say you had a white woman?" Bobo said, "Yeah." As much as they tortured him, Bobo, a mere child, refused to back down and submit. This was simply too much for Millam. He squeezed the trigger on his .45. A shot rang out, and a bullet tore through Bobo's head. His night of torture had finally ended. His severely beaten, mutilated, and castrated body was found 3 days later at the bottom of that river, tied to that very Jenny wheel that he'd been forced to carry. In January of 2017, 72-year-old Carol Bryan Donham would finally admit that she had made the accusations up. I was born 2.5 years after Emmett Till was murdered. The world that I was born into is much different from the one that we live in today. As a very young child, one of the very first things that I remember was my mother telling me, and sometimes pleading with me to do, was to be careful, mind myself, and always remember what happened to Emmett Till. You see, Mom was very concerned about my well-being. Unlike my brothers and my cousins, I had this habit of openly questioning things that I felt were unjust. It just didn't make sense to me that it was all right to treat people differently because of the color of their skin. I simply could not accept that there were laws on the books prohibiting people who looked like me from staying in public accommodations, from riding on trains and buses, from eating at lunch counters, from marrying the person that they loved if he or she was of a different race. You have to remember, Loving versus Virginia didn't become law. That's the case that struck down anti-segregation and anti-integrated marriages. It was struck down in 1967. While many of you might see my traits as being honorable, it was the late 50s and early 60s, and things are quite different. That kind of thinking by a black person, and even a black child, could have deadly consequences. Every year, my family would take a 13-hour, 800-mile drive from Stamford, Connecticut to my grandparents' home in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I remember those trips fondly. We would pack things to eat in a shoebox. Things like tangerines, bread, fried chicken, and pound cake. We would then stop in White Plains, New York, and pick up my Aunt Pearl, then meet my Uncle LeGrand and my Uncle Walter at the toll plaza at the beginning of the New Jersey Turnpike. Turnpike. We then trailed down in separate cars down I-95 to Washington, D.C., and eventually to 301, which is a rural road, one lane each way. I-95 had not been completed at the time. As we headed south, my mother and her siblings would talk about the joys and pains of growing up in a large black family in the South. My mother was the second youngest of 11 children living in a 4-room house. 1 bedroom for the girls, 1 bedroom for the boys, 1 bedroom for my grandparents. Things on the drive were rather normal to me until we arrived at Maryland House, a rest stop on I-95. We would stop there and use the bathroom facilities while the adults would fill the car with gasoline for our next leg of the journey. We had just crossed the Mason-Dixon line, and even as a child, I realized that the rest of the trip was somehow different. The adults were more on edge, more cautious, more careful in the words they chose when speaking to people who did not share our dark hues. We didn't stop at motels or restaurants, and with very rare exception, we no longer took for granted that we could use the restroom at the gas stations. As odd as things were, my world was not as bad as it was for my family members who came before me. Unlike my paternal great-great-grandparents, I did not know the pain and personal indignities of slavery. Unlike my maternal grandfather, Edward, I never had to search for and find the body of a little brother who was lynched because someone felt that he had disrespected him. I didn't feel the pain of what Papa felt when seeing German prisoners of war using white-only water fountains that he and other black people would have gone to jail or even been killed for using. Unlike my mother Dorothy, who would walk miles and miles to get to the colored schoolhouse while white children were being driven on buses. Unlike my father Junius, I wasn't almost beaten to death by a mob of white men who did it just because they could. No, I didn't have to suffer these personal indignities. But during my lifetime, Jim Crow laws were still on the books and still being enforced. Churches were being bombed, little black boys and girls were being murdered, and civil rights warriors were being slain. Even as a child, I felt deeply the injustices of others during the turbulence of the civil rights movement. And I recoiled at images of dogs and fire hose used to attack civil rights demonstrators. My heart grieved for the loss of 4 little girls who died in the bombing on the 16th Street Church in Alabama. That's Atlanta. I was angered by the assassinations of NAACP President Vernon Dahmer and NAACP Field Secretary Medgar Evers, both killed because they dared to help black Mississippians gain and use the right to vote, a right explicitly guaranteed by the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Yet amid all this chaos and turmoil was a steady presence of Dr. King. Frederick Douglass pointed to the North Star. Dr. King followed it through the streets of Atlanta, Montgomery, and Selma, from a jail cell in Birmingham, and to the steps of our nation's most distinguished monuments. From my perspective, Dr. King's greatest attributes may be summarized in 3 phrases. He inspired, he persisted, and he kept his faith. Let's start with inspiration. Man, did that guy inspire. It's a rare speech these days that does not include a quote from this gifted and eloquent leader. And I am hard-pressed to read anything he said without a chill going from the base of my neck all the way down to the bottom of my spine. Consider these words on the steps of the Lincoln Monument in 1963. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, which has been marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunities of this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us on demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Ladies and gentlemen, those are bold words. They're also very dangerous words for an outspoken black man. And yet King, buoyed by a growing chorus of those seeking justice and equality, persisted. In fact, he persisted to the very end on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee, despite the daily peril of a freedom fighter. As we know, however, his strength arose not from violence, but from peace. To the contrary, he steeled himself against perpetuation of violence for a cause by studying Mahatma Gandhi when he attended Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania. Over time, he crafted a strategy that was guided by conscience and fortified by nonviolent protests and demonstrations. Dr. King was bravely committed to the path because he knew that this was the path to change. He said the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you can't murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence, you may murder the hater, but you do not murder hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. So it goes. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness in the night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Put another way, the virulently racist Bull Connor could have brought up every police dog and fire hose in the entire country to quell the civil rights demonstrations in Birmingham, and he would fail. Dr. King was only human, and he must have had moments of anger and despair throughout this great struggle. However, his faith remained strong. Faith in this country, faith in its ideals, faith in the rule of law, and faith in the goodness of people. To his core, Dr. King believed and never lost hope. As evidenced by the speech he gave on April 3rd, 1968, like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I am not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go to the mountain and look over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that tonight, we as a people will get to the promised land. Dr. King was assassinated the next day. It was a crushing day for my family and my community. I clearly remember the heaviness in my chest and the tears that flowed. What would we do without it? I'll tell you what we'd do. We would take on the mantle of inspiration, persistence, and faith. And it was a challenge I ultimately took on to myself. I wasn't quite sure where I would end up, but I knew it would be somewhere where I could make a difference, and in turn, honor the legacy of Dr. King. And although I did not realize it until much later, all the events that I experienced in my youth fell into place, leading me to the realization that the courts could be a powerful force in making things right. Brown versus Board of Education and the court's role in the admission of Jane Meredith to the University of Mississippi are but two small examples. But first, I needed to get my education. I graduated from the University of Connecticut with a bachelor's degree, and then I went to West Virginia College of Law and obtained my Juris Doctorate degree. I returned to Connecticut full of enthusiasm and ready to find a job. Unfortunately, however, the landscape for black attorneys was much different in the 1980s than it is now. We were not as readily accepted in traditional law firms. I couldn't find a job, and I began to give up hope. But with the help of a mentor, attorney Jay Sandback, and a much-needed pep talk, I landed a job as staff counsel for my hometown city of Stamford. I went on to serve as assistant corporation counsel. Suffice it to say, some people that I was representing weren't exactly accepting of me in the beginning. I remember vividly at my first board meeting, someone in a not-so-low stage whisper said, I guess I'll have to learn Swahili. Another client complained to my supervisor that she didn't think I was experienced enough to represent her. Although I suspect that that wasn't the real reason she didn't want me on the case. My boss refused to take me off the case, and I subsequently went on to win. Actually, I never wanted to represent that client again, but I got over it. And went on to win every single case I represented her in. I don't know what I savored more. I don't know what I savored more, winning the case or the look on her face when I did. Things were steadily improving for me. During this time, I also had the great honor of serving as president of the Stanford branch of the NAACP and as general counsel of the Connecticut Conference of the NAACP. I found it to be a tremendous way of giving back to the community that had given me so much. Simultaneously, more and more minorities were entering public service, as government organizations recognized the need to have staff that represented the faces of the people they served. I was appointed as a Superior Court judge in March of 2000, remained on the Superior Court until 2007, when I was appointed to the Appellate Court, and then in 2013, when I was appointed to the Supreme Court. I became Chief Justice last year, a position I never could have imagined having until Governor Dan Malloy called me, and I almost didn't answer the phone. As many of you will learn, as you age, gratitude for what's good in your life grows with every decade. To say that I'm grateful to have the opportunity to serve my home state as Chief Justice would be a vast understatement. And the fact of the matter is that this country is a much, much better place than it used to be. When I was born, it was improbable, if not impossible, for my parents to ever think that their son would become the first African American to become an attorney for the city of Stanford, the 5th African American to ever sit on the Connecticut Appellate Court, the 4th African American ever to be appointed to the Supreme Court, and the 1st African American ever to be appointed Chief Justice. It is not lost on me that I've held these positions not because I was the first African American qualified to do it, because I was the first African American to be the chance to do it. Nor is it lost on me that the governor nominated me and the Connecticut General Assembly, Republicans and Democrats, men and women, black, white, and brown, Asian and Latino, unanimously affirmed the nomination of a black man to be the Chief Justice. It was an incredibly humbling moment, and one that I'm very proud of. It's been a long, tough road for our people and our country. But as my wife Nancy often reminds me, the struggle for America to live up to its promises, or if you will, to deliver on its promissory note, is not a sprint, but a marathon. And to this marathon, I bring to the table a reverence for the rule of law. If there's anything that will save this nation and that will sustain the water America's promise of liberty and justice for all, it will be the rule of law. Some of you might wonder exactly what is the rule of law. Well, that term is somewhat ambiguous and means different things to different people. When I talk about it, it means the basic agreement we have made with each other that neither our government nor any man or woman or thing is above the law, and that everyone has the fundamental right to be treated equally. Now, I fully recognize that we as a country are facing significant challenges to the rule of law. Too many people have lost trust and confidence in the government, and hateful and violent words are more readily digested and acted upon. But the rule of law does not distinguish between someone who worships for different gods. It most certainly doesn't preclude those who are not citizens from receiving due process in American courts. As I said, my faith in the rule of law runs deep, as is my commitment in upholding it. Our courts have no power of the purse to enforce rulings, nor do they have armies or a police force. Rather, a judge's order carries weight because people have faith in the institution and faith in the court's solemn oath to protect their rights, even if they lose their case. A lack of civility and negative discord erodes our social compact with those we serve. And today's polarizing rhetoric weakens our democracy. We must protect this foundation upon which our most cherished values rest, and rebuild the public's trust and confidence, brick by brick, to strengthen our underpinnings. Moreover, I believe that many of the dedicated individuals Dr. King spoke about during his speeches were and are a part of our legal system. Yes, the system is flawed, and in some ways deeply flawed. But that which is created by humankind certainly almost always is. The war on drugs in urban areas and the creation of the prison industrial complex has had a disparate impact on people of color, as well as the poor, and has had a devastating impact on our communities. Add to this the elements of past governmental sanctioned discrimination, as well as explicit and implicit bias in everything from A to Z. And in this age of social media, it is sadly common to see viral videos of someone berating or questioning a person of color for nothing more than trying to enter his apartment, calling on their cell phone, being in a hotel lobby, or having a picnic. No, neither our country nor our courts are perfect. But from the inside looking out, I can assure you there are many, many committed individuals with the court system who embrace and recognize the necessity of diversity. In fact, I'm proud to report Connecticut State Courts diversity and cultural competency training for judges, staff, external stakeholders has received national recognition. Nevertheless, I am constantly thinking of the journey ahead, and I confess I do some of my best thinking during my hour-long commute from Hartford to my home in Stratford. On one of those recent rides, I remember listening to a station on satellite radio called Soul Town. An old 1991 R&B song came on titled Round and Round that was written by Prince and sung by Tevin Campbell. As my thoughts started swirling, I thought about how the world has changed since Dr. King has started in the civil rights movement. I thought about Medgar Evers and many other civil rights warriors we lost through active violence. I thought about a note that Medgar's widow, Merle Everett Williams, wrote me congratulating me when I became Chief Justice and reminding me of the work that Medgar had started has not been finished. I thought about what's going on in our country today. I thought about Emmett Till, and then started thinking about Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin. I thought about Selma, Alabama, but then I thought about Ferguson, Missouri. I thought about the promise of a new era when a clear majority of American voters, Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, men, women, black, white, brown, Asian, Latino, elected the first black president, only to subsequently think about the current backlash to that wonderful historic moment. I thought about the rise of alt-right and the other hate groups entering the mainstream, wearing the garbs of normalcy, both in clothing and in rhetoric, and the acceptance and deafening silence of people whom I thought were my allies or even my friends. Against this backdrop, I began to despair, until I started really listening to the words of the song. The lyrics kept drawing me in, and they went like this. I say, nothing comes from dreamers but dreams. I say, sitting idle in our boat while everyone else is down the stream. Nothing comes from talkers but sound. We can talk all we want to, but the world still goes around and round. Suddenly it came to me. I realized that I didn't think about Dr. King's I Have a Dream sermon as something static in time. A vision that a dreamer had over 50 years ago about a day that may never come. But it dawned on me, the dream hasn't been deferred. Rather, it's been left for us to carry out. You see, Dr. King was more than a dreamer. He was a person of action who inspired others to do the same. There's a reason that his quotes are often used in speeches throughout the years. That's because they still resonate with us and mean something. And to mean something is to do something. When you get a chance, please reread the I Have a Dream sermon. Please note that it doesn't start with this dream, but with a description of America as it was when I was born, a country in crisis and a call to action. He said, "I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom, left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in this valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It's a dream deeply rooted in the American dream." Dr. King goes on to explain his dream in the next 8 paragraphs of that wonderful sermon. Each paragraph starting with, "I have a dream." But this just wasn't him talking about a dream. It was a seed planted very deeply in the American psyche, a seed that he masterfully delivered as a call to action for all Americans, not just Black Americans. This was his genius and his vision of the future. And thus he continued, "This is our hope, and this is our faith, that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discourse of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we'll be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will all be free one day." Dr. King is no longer physically with us, but his dream and his call to action remains. Yes, some great things have happened since he was called home. Some Black people have attained heights that were unthought of during his lifetime. Thurgood Marshall became a justice of the United States Supreme Court a mere 6 months before Dr. King's death. I wonder if Dr. King would have dared to believe that in the relatively short time after he passed, a Black man named Andrew Gillum and a Black woman named Stacey Abrams would run for governor in the deep south states of Florida and Georgia and almost win. That a Black man would be nominated by the governor of the state of Connecticut and approved unanimously by the General Assembly to serve as Chief Justice. That a Black man, Sean T. Woodman, would be elected to serve as treasurer of the state of Connecticut. And that he followed a Black woman, Denise Napier, and 2 other Black men, Joseph Suggs and Francisco Borges, in that position. That my fellow Stanfordite, William Tong, a Chinese man, be elected to the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut. That a Black woman, Johanna Hayes, would be elected to the United States Congress for the state of Connecticut. That General Colin Powell would serve as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and Secretary of State of the United States. That a Black woman, Condoleezza Rice, would serve as Secretary of State of the United States. Or that Barack Hussein Obama, a Black man, would serve 2 consecutive terms as President of the United States, and while doing so would seek to fix our healthcare system so that it would provide sorely needed, affordable, quality healthcare for those who need it most. Something I can assure you, Dr. King put on the top of this list. While there have been many successes, there have also been some troubling failures. Take a look at the plight of our inner cities, our affordable housing situation, our deeply troubled and racially divided public school system, our prisons. And I think we all can agree that you won't have to look too long or too hard to see that we have failed some of our most vulnerable people. We have come a long way, but we have so far to go. There is a lot of hard work to do, and as Dr. King said in his last sermon, we've got some difficult days ahead. But I know Dr. King would not have us rest on our laurels for even a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, we must move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we must continue moving forward before we pass the baton on to your generation, and you pass it on to the generation after. To quote Dr. King, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. It will require vision. It will require courage. And only when you begin to make inroads to the problems that we still must confront will we bring this country to a new level of justice. I am confident that we can do it. And this is my final message to you today. Just as Dr. King called upon us to be inspired, be persistent, and keep the faith, the task before us is mighty, but so is our commitment. So as he eloquently said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a quote from the great writer George Bernard Shaw. On hearing it, some of you may remember that Senator Edward Kennedy used it to eulogize his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, another civil rights warrior and dreamer who had been taken from us long before his work was finished. Shaw wrote, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. Others dream things that never were and ask why not." I think that these words are very fitting for our dreamer, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief Justice Robinson. Joining the Chief Justice is Elif Al-Muhaidi, who graduated from Saginaw Valley State University with a bachelor's degree in biology, with minors in chemistry and political science. Currently, she is a third-year Juris Doctor candidate at the University of Connecticut School of Law. As an aspiring lawyer, she is passionate about human rights and social justice issues. Elif has spent some time as a legal intern abroad, both in refugee camps in Greece and an international law firm in Saudi Arabia. She volunteers in the local community in her free time, assisting local refugees in acclimating to their new environment. When she's not studying, Elif enjoys visiting small towns, dining at local eateries, and frequenting cafes. Elif?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
As you know, the title for this event is Courageous Path, so I wanted to start out with a question about courage and how it can be applied to help get us where we want to go.
Courage means a lot of things to a lot of people, but one of the places where I need for folks to be courageous, I need you to be courageous, is communicating with people who have thoughts that are not like your own. We tend to shelter ourselves and only surround ourselves with people who think exactly like us. If we continue to do that, we'll never get anything done. I need you, we need you, to have the courage to talk to people who disagree with you. Sort of like the other six justices on my court. I'm right, by the way. There you go. But that takes a lot of courage, and it's a difficult thing to do. I've had a difficult time talking to my friends since in the last 5-6 years. Some of them feel very strongly about things that I feel the exact opposite about. But we find ways to have that conversation.
We've heard a lot about the lack of diversity in the judicial branch, and I wanted to see what your views are about the need for more diversity and the manner in which the courts treat members of different races.
Diversity in the branch is extremely important. I'm the chairman of the Cultural Competency Committee. We have a bunch of different committees with different roles to try to make sure that not only is the court diverse, but the court is culturally competent. You can't do that if you're not from that culture. I mean, you try to understand, but without the input of the person working next to you, standing next to you, interfacing with you, until that's done, you can't really get the job done. So diversity is extremely important. I can tell you now, the Supreme Court is rather diverse, especially compared to what it was like 20 years ago. And there has been cases that we've had where that diversity has made a difference. Because you can say, look, yes, the law is this, but look at this issue and how it affects these people. And it doesn't change the law, but it changes how we may address the issue. And so diversity is extremely important.
I've recently heard you speak about microaggressions and unconscious bias. Can you give the audience a little rundown about that?
Okay. Microaggressions, and I'll start with unconscious bias. It's also called implicit association. From the moment that we started learning, we learn things that we may not even agree with, but you learn them. And so what happens is, over time, you actually start relying on this implicit association. One of the things I do that's a lot of fun is it sort of looks like a Jeopardy board, and it has letters, and the letters are gibberish, but they're different colors: red, blue, green, yellow. The next time I show the colors, the letters, the word red is in red, the word blue is in blue, the word yellow is in yellow. The very next one, the word red is in green. People are able to do the first two tests, but they can't do the third test because you've implicitly associated the word red with the color red. And we use that to show people that sometimes your subconscious mind can be doing things. Think of it this way. Have you ever met somebody you sort of instantly like and you don't know why? Or if you're doing something, I don't know if you travel outside the country, but you travel outside the country and you've been away for 2 weeks. My family is into karate, and so we go to do karate tournaments. And we were in China for 2 weeks one time doing a tournament out in Luoyang. And I ran into an American, and it was like, oh, you're wonderful. I wanted to take this guy home with me, and I knew nothing of him but a serial killer. But he was familiar to me, and so we associate things together. We feel good about something or bad about something. Another example is, if you look at what they're doing with orchestras now, there was this gender bias with female musicians, and so a lot of orchestras had mostly men. They confronted that situation by doing blind auditions. They would have a screen, and the person would audition behind the screen. You couldn't see the gender, you couldn't see the race, you couldn't see anything. And lo and behold, the number of female and minority musicians started to go up. These people who were doing the auditions, who was watching auditions, I don't think they were racist. I don't think that was the issue. I don't think they were sexist. I think it was just this sort of thing that's in the background that affects your decision-making ability. The thing is, once you know about that, the phenomenon starts to retreat.
And once you're aware of it, you start consciously trying to change your decisions, or you just become more aware of the decisions you're making.
Right, those decisions can be deadly. It could be a police officer in a shoot situation. It could be an employer who's trying to hire the best candidate and doesn't get that candidate because, hey, these Yukon Huskies gotta be good, which is true, gotta be good. You have to watch out what you're doing with that information.
So we want to turn a little bit to the future, and we want to hear a little bit about your vision for the future of our judicial system. What changes would you advocate for and why?
The biggest changes that we need to make is becoming more usable to the public, and by that, the judicial system was once sort of an ivory tower, and it's for a black box. Nobody knew how it worked on the inside. That lack of transparency caused us a lot of problems. As I said during my speech earlier, we don't have the power, except for contempt powers, to make you do something. People do what we ask them to do because they believe in the system. It's I lost, I'll pay the money. Or I won, I'll take the money. Or those kinds of things. And so in order for us to continue that, we have to start rebuilding the confidence in our, not just the judicial branch, but in our governmental institutions in general.
Do you believe that voluntary, professional, and community service is necessary commitment to persons holding public office? And what forms of voluntary, professional, and community services have you been involved with in the past and currently?
Well, I spent a lot of time with the NAACP. I was on the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. I was the chairman of the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. Those organizations really helped me, and I didn't know that I was going to be a judge. In fact, when Governor Rowland approached me about becoming a judge, I hadn't had my paperwork in. And And so his legal counsel said, "Are you interested in becoming a judge?" "Oh, yeah, absolutely." And I totally forgot about it because I was in the middle of a big trial. 6 months later, I ran to the governor, and he said, you didn't fill out your paperwork." So I said, "Oh, I forgot, I'll do it." And I forgot once again, and ran into him another time. And at that point, he said, "You know, I don't ask anybody twice. I'm asking you 3 times. Get your paperwork in." So I got my paperwork in. But one of the things that got me exposed to the point where the governor even thought about me was all the work that I was doing in these different roles. And by doing all those diverse things, I think I learned a lot about how government works. I learned a lot about people. And it was very fulfilling. I mean, there was nothing like getting my hands dirty, that old phrase, to really understand people and understand the system. And so I think that I'm very biased about this. It's not implicit, it's explicit. I think that everyone needs to do volunteer work and find an area that you love, that you like. It doesn't have to be something that you plan to do for the rest of your professional life. But I guarantee you it will help you no matter what that is.
So lately, we've seen a lot of activism from youth, and I know there's a lot of young people here in the audience. So we wanted to ask about how the judicial system applies social justice principles in their work with younger people, and how do we expand opportunities for young people to participate in decisions that govern their lives?
Well, the thing you have to remember is the 3 branches of government have totally different functions. So the social justice function, what I work on from the branch's point of view, is making sure that we treat everyone equally and that everyone has access, regardless of race, gender, physical ability, or disability. Those are the things that I do to make that happen. But you got to move to 2 other branches that you can influence and work in. The thing is, get involved in your government. If I were to give advice for a young person, I would say a couple of things. One is, learn our history. We're at a point now where, especially with younger people, history and civics, those classes aren't really taught like they used to be. So you have those opportunities here. I know there's some great classes here. I can remember going to some of my history classes here. It was incredible. And actually, that did inspire. One of those inspired me to go to law school. Being in this community, I think, will help you with social justice and social activism. But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. You have a chance here to communicate with people who have thoughts and thinking different from yours. You can't shut that process down. That means that sometimes you're going to hear things you don't want to hear. You're going to talk to people who don't like you, don't have similar thoughts, don't like your religion or your race or your gender, whatever. But you can't let that stop the conversation. You always have to have that, because we're a society of many, many different people and many, many different thoughts. And some of them you're not going to like, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have those conversations.
What are some of the major issues in the conversation revolving around gun control?
I have to be very careful with that one, because you have to remember what I do. So I can't talk about something that may come before the court. But the whole gun control issue from a legal point of view is this issue of what does the Second Amendment really mean? And you have different views on what that means. Connecticut has rather strong gun control laws, but neighboring states don't. One of the problems is when you have one state that has lax gun control laws and another state with very strict gun control laws, we have very porous borders, and so that affects your neighboring state. But to the extent of how I feel about it, it doesn't matter. I follow what Connecticut case law says and what the Constitution says.
Now, we're kind of getting towards the end, and I wanted to ask you about who or what some major influences in your life are and why.
I was thinking about that the other day. I did a program down in Stanford, and the most important major influences on my life were the people who were the closest to me. Believe it or not, one of the people that had the most influence on me, besides my dad, who was an incredible guy, who passed a few years ago, was my barber. He was just a wonderful guy who you go to the barber shop, and I don't know if you know how there's sort of a stereotype of black barbershops. But there are a lot like that. You go there to socialize and get the haircut and figure out who's getting married and who's not getting, who's in trouble, who's not in trouble. But my barber was one of those people who, it was part of my village. And it was like, I knew that if I was doing something wrong or my thinking wasn't quite right, that Mr. Bradford was going to talk to my dad. So it was the people who were close to me. I talked about Jay Sandak, who was an attorney in Stanford, who, for whatever reason, is just this wonderful, wonderful person who reached out to me and had a tremendous influence on my career. And he actually was the MC when I was sworn in by the governor. My mother, who is this incredible individual who used to worry about me a lot. I can remember those, hey, remember what happened in the Hill speeches, and I used to say, yeah, that's going to happen. Which, she was right.
Mother always knows best.
She is.
Sounds a lot like mine. Be careful, don't do this. Make sure you watch what you say.
Absolutely.
So, final question, going back to the audience. What advice, you started getting into this a little earlier, but what advice would you give people, especially young people who are thinking about pursuing legal careers in particular?
Make sure that you have a well-rounded background. People tend to think of lawyers as only litigators or only commercial transaction kind of people. But if you really think about it, a lawyer is involved in almost every aspect of our lives. And so, even if you have, I went to law school with a man who was a surgeon, which I thought was incredible. And I asked him why was he attending law school, and he said he was afraid of blood. That did make me wonder. But, you know, once again, it's sort of it's a theme to me. You have to get out there and get into the world. Talk to people who are unlike you. Do things that are unlike the things you did when you were young. The university environment really helps that, by the way. But I think it's not just diversity in people, it's diversity in mind, it's diversity in thought, it's diversity in almost every aspect of your life. Because once you open yourself up like that, I mean, the world opens up to you. My son, who is 23 now, sorry, I believe, he also is in the karate. He's a 4th degree black belt. My wife's a 6th degree black belt, which is the reason why I had to start studying karate. And I'm a 4th degree black belt. But one of the things I just love about my son is when we traveled, his thing was to make sure he ate the ethnic food for the community where we were. And I agree with him, but he was a lot more daring. So it's what I'm telling you is broaden your horizons as much as you can. Open up as many doors as you can, and only close them as you need to. I think that worked for me, and I'm in a job now where I think I'm very successful, and I don't measure success by money. I measure success by, I wake up every morning thinking, I get to go to work. And, you know, that drive up to Hartford is an amazing drive. As I said, sometimes I do some of my best thinking there.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's truly been an honor to be able to share a stage with you. I'd like the audience to join me in thanking.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure, and it's something that I never would have expected being back here after, you know, I am a Husky. I dabble with mountaineerism, but I am a Husky, and glad to be here with my fellow Huskies.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice Robinson Lee Lashley. This afternoon's final musical selection was arranged by UConn's Director of Jazz Studies, Professor Earl McDonald. Lift Every Voice and Sing was written as a poem by James Weldon Johnson in 1900 and set to music by his brother, John Rosalind Johnson, in 1905. It is often referred to as the Black National Anthem for its power in voicing a cry for liberation and affirmation for African American people. We will be hearing an instrumental version, however, and the lyrics of the first stanza will be displayed above. Thank you to all of our performers and everyone that helped us put this program together today. A special thanks to Chief Justice Robinson. Throughout his courageous journey, he stood and continues to stand up for what is right. He is a very vocal advocate for making the judicial system fairer for marginalized citizens and even facilitated diversity and cultural competency training in the judiciary. We are grateful for his courage and tenacity and thank him for continuing to be a beacon of light for so many of us as we find ways to stand up for what's right, both here on our university campuses and out in the world. Dr. King told us one of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through great periods of social change. Every society has its protectors of status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent, who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. Today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. So in spite of the messages that we hear in our world today that might signal to us there is no reason to have hope, we must remind ourselves that Dr. King also told us, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. There will be many opportunities for you to take that first step, and here are a few reasons why you should.
I want to be more involved outside of just my community in Chicago. I want to travel overseas and help out people all over the world.
Now is the time to come together, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, but as Americans.
Bear the burden because they don't feel comfortable to speak up. Every single American should have the opportunity to attend college or trade school. LGBTQ, women, people of color, immigrants, whatever it may be, is default the representative of their entire community. And that is a lot of responsibility.
I'ma keep on running because the women don't quit on themselves.
Remember, it is through your action the legacy of Dr. King will live on. Thank you, Adam Sheriff, for the video, and thank you all for coming. Have a great day.